In Mandy, they take his Mandy. In Pig, they take his pig. Pig is a new movie as of this recording, starring Nicolas Cage, is produced by him as well, about a former chef in Portland, Oregon, who is now a recluse in the woods living with his pig. And although it's a drama, I've seen a couple of people talk about how it's a little bit like John Wick, and I would say it is somewhat like that in its own weird way. It's almost like John Wick meets Hiroshima Mon Amour is kind of more my take on it. And it's got some pretty favorable reviews so far. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the movie, a little bit scene by scene, about my interpretation of the events, what's going on, maybe what's in characters' heads, things like that. It's going to be full of spoilers. Some of the spoilers and stuff is going to be non-linear because a film like this is usually generally kind of like a rewatchable film because you're going to see a lot of stuff, because you're going to see a lot of moments that won't seem to necessarily make sense the first time you watch, but in the context of the rest of the film, make everything make a lot more sense. So let's start. Opening of the movie. You got Nicolas Cage truffling with a pig. They're hunting truffles out in the woods. Hi, cat. Can you truffle? And after they get back home to their cabin, you do see some more bonding moments between Nicolas Cage and his pig. Like he makes a full meal and shares it with the pig. This might be his only way of having a meaningful connection with another living being without the subject matter of either his dead wife or daughter, somebody very important like that coming up in a conversation. Or we pretty much know the relation of this character, this dead character, and him by the fact that his name is Rob Feld or Robin Feld, and the person who would be deceased is Lauren Feld. But moving on, he is visited at his cabin by Amir. Amir is played by Alex Wolff of Hereditary fame, and there's some like goods trades there for the truffles. I don't think I noticed any money. It's like goods, batteries in particular for a boombox, food, things like that. Amir makes reference to the fact that Rob not only looks disheveled, but probably stinks to high heaven, saying like, hey, I can get you a camp shower, you know? And they seem to not get along, like Rob is annoyed, but what I really think is going on more is that Rob is not allowing any meaningful interaction to happen. And this is very much a part of the core of who Robin is. Every interaction, every person he seems to interact with, he has to turn into like a meaningful interaction. It's very much the core of how he thinks and goes about his life. But Amir leaves, not very happy necessarily, says, see you next Thursday. I don't know if that's actually see you next Thursday or if it means C-U-N-T, but Robin, very much a hermit, established. Cage, as Robin Feld, then attempts to listen to a tape on this boombox after he puts new batteries in it. He only lasts a couple seconds, cannot bring himself to do it, has to turn it off, put the boombox up, and move on. We move forward a little bit more to at night where he's asleep, and his cabin is approached by a vehicle. This distresses the pig. Some people break into the house, they hit Rob, they take his pig. It's a very traumatic moment. Probably one of the best directed moments, maybe technically directed moments of the movie, because it is disorienting in a great way. And that's really the end of the very first part. Then we go on to him waking up. He's been beat pretty badly. He gets into his clunker of a truck. I mean, a real clunker. You see he's having a hard time like shifting gears, you know, just not starting well. Lots of noises, but he does manage to get it to a diner to call Amir, ask him for some help. Amir takes him to like a co-op, some farmers, something like that. They eventually explain that, hey, you know, this truffling pig has been stolen, which almost amusingly, that is something that does get one of the people's attention there to a good degree. And they get their first lead to some probably junkies is kind of what seems to be implied here. And they just say like, we aren't involved. We don't know we have just nothing to do with this. And as we find out later, that is probably who it was those people who took the pig. Either way, somebody took the pig. They feel like they might get some leads in the city, so off they go. And this is where it's even clear when it comes to a duality juxtaposition when it comes to Amir and Robin Feld. Alex is clean, nice looking, has a nice car. But something here I find interesting is that we find out that they are in a very similar situation in an existential crisis kind of way. Robin Feld has a hard time dealing with the death of this Lauren Feld. Cannot accept it. Amir has a mom who is in a coma, effectively brain dead, but still somewhat living. There is somewhat, a similar crisis there. She's effectively dead, but not, denying Amir the chance to grieve. One of the things that's different is this choice is being put upon him, not him putting it upon himself. Amir also has classical music on in the car. Not just classical music, but also kind of like commentary talking about how classical music is the best and this is why. And Robin Feld, Nicolas Cage, turns it off twice. And later on in the film, we notice Robin Feld finds beauty in basically this little kid messing around with this little hand drum thing. So it's not like he doesn't like music. He doesn't like this clinical classical stuff. It's kind of soulless. But oh boy, they go to downtown Portland, my hometown. But now they make it to my hometown, Portland, Oregon. Everybody hates it when you say it that way. Where they go to question the Hobo King. That's what I call him, at least. I don't know. This is where things kind of delve a little bit into being like John Wick with secret sub-societies and things like that. Almost like Neverwhere here with the bum kind of guy. And you start learning a little bit more about Robin Feld being a legendary chef, things like that. But even still, that really isn't much of a lead to anything, just talking with the guy. But what we are getting out of this scene of going person to person interrogating is seeing that Nick Cage is on a mission. He's got to get this pig back. This is really important to him, not just something who finds truffles for him. His next stop is where the film probably gets its most ridiculous, is they go to the old Portland Hotel, which is supposed to be the basements and sub-basements of an old Portland hotel. Those basements still exist even though the hotel was demolished, and that is where Pioneer Courthouse Square is. I don't know if I've ever heard that history or not. I do have kind of some brain damage and stuff. But I've been to Pioneer Courthouse Square a bajillion times. And when they go to this Portland hotel, it's like a restaurateur, busboy, waiter fight club, which makes me feel a little bit ripped off. I've been on those Shanghai Tunnels tour. I never saw that part. Saying the Shanghai Tunnel's racist? I'm still not sure there. Robert on this channel pointed out that this also could be somewhat have referencing to Chuck Palahniuk. I hope I said that right. The writer of Fight Club. He's from Portland. I think he still lives here. But I think he was also a waiter here, so that could be some referencing there. So probably veering more into fantasy now. I've never seen a restauranters Fight Club. The most I've seen is half of the staff of the Fishwife restaurant offering Robert cocaine. I don't know if I missed something here, but it kind of didn't feel like it led to anything. I don't think they got information on where to go to next. But anyway, they go to a nice restaurant next. I think here locally it's Jake's Grill. I was pretty sure of that. Across from the Galleria. And we're coming up upon probably the first big Nick Cage really wowing us moment. And he's been very expressionistic in this movie, but no unintended laughter parts. Like engrossing but not realistic, that kind of thing. And they get served what's probably supposed to be one of the fancier dishes, and it's pretty amusing because Nicolas Cage still looks like has not really showered still. He's still bloodied up, and now he's swollen. He looks like a Encino Man after being rescued from a POW camp in this nice restaurant. But he amusingly senses the lack of passion in this food. He goes to ask to talk with the chef, and the chef, a little bit into their interaction, recognizes him. This guy was a prep cook for Robin Feld at some point, because Robin Feld is a local legendary chef who left the scene. And Robin proceeds to talk to him about what happened with your passion. You wanted to do something that was definitely not this. It was, the guy goes yeah, I wanted to open just an English tavern, but nobody wants that. And, it's a funny scene, but it's also still a heartfelt scene. It's where you really see that one of the things with Robin Feld is every interaction he tends to have leads to a very meaningful connection. And bringing this other chef to tears, he gets his first real lead, Amir's dad. So just backing up half a moment, if all his interactions are like this, he will constantly be reminded of his wife, daughter, whoever this Lauren Feld is. But this pig also probably has a connection with Lauren, much like John Wick's dog had with his wife. And there's enough crumbs at this point that's interspersed in dialogue and stuff to see that simply being part of society is nothing meaningful on its own. A superficial connection is just the same as no connection. Robin Feld and Amir are probably both hermits by this definition. At least Robin had his pig. What does Amir have? His nice car? Sterile classical music? It's Amir's dad keeping her on life support. In perpetuity, because this dad in a way is kind of like Robin Feld, or he cannot let her go by choice, even if it's just a technicality, which is also happening with the pig. It's just the technicality the pig is alive because he's only alive in Robin Feld's mind. Spoiler, the pig is already dead. And it's not just that with Rob. Lauren Feld is technically not dead in his mind either. That's why he can't listen to the tape. And also kind of makes this Schrodinger's pig, kind of alive and dead at the same time. And from my understanding of the movie, Robin has never visited Lauren's mausoleum site. So she probably died of a car wreck when Robin wasn't there or anything. I'm sure there's something going on there. If I don't see the body or something, there's always that little possibility that she could be alive, no matter how absurd. So now in this next part, they're off to see Amir's dad, the restaurateur Mafia Don of Portland, it would seem. And he's played by Alan Arkin of St. Elmo's Fire. And when Cage is on his way to this guy's house, there's a pretty funny moment where he steals a bike. He sees the bike, takes it down, just grunt yells at someone. Anyway, that bit was good stuff. I hope that's what gets submitted to the Oscars. But in this meeting, we start weaving back into Neverwhere territory again, of underground worlds and secret society feeling stuff. And after some tense exchange, Adam Rifkin says that the pig is still alive, but might not be if Nicolas Cage presses any farther. Probably a lot more parts to the scene, but it's probably a lot of stuff I've already kind of touched on or earlier points. And there's some stuff probably inferred that I may be missing a little bit when it has to do with Adam Rifkin and Amir's relationship. Maybe the dad is extra mad at his son trying to make a name for himself through something attached to memories of his wife, which we will get into a little bit more here in a moment. And that something being Robin Feld himself. And hence he's trying to sabotage this whole relationship that these two guys got going. Not just the money motivation to steal this pig to get truffles for his restaurant empire. Maybe even he's the one who murdered it. Comment your insights below. But all this leads to Nicolas Cage / Robin Feld devising a plan to make a meal for Alan Alda. A big part of these meaningful interactions that Robin Feld has had in his life are these meals he's prepared for people. Whether it's something as simple, a meal for his pig, or a meal he has prepared for Adam Arkin and his wife in the past, which we know through Amir. His mom used to talk over and over about a night where they had this best meal of their life, of course made by Robin Feld himself. I would say this memory of hearing this story over and over that Amir has of his mom telling him is a great piece of Amir's mom that he can hold on to not be in despair anymore. If he was only allowed to grieve, that is. Now, Robin prepares this new meal with Amir heavily involved. They are hand over hand cutting pieces of chicken together. The whole thing very collaborative together. And this moment is the meaningful interaction that Robin is allowed to happen with Amir, is this moment that we are at right now. And then the climax, the meal. Probably the same meal that Allen Iverson had with his wife all those years ago, though now prepared by his son, of which who he is denying grief, leaving them in a limbo of despair. Himself as well. They eat, chew, contemplate, in relative silence. This brings Adam Ark into tears of revelation and sadness and frustration and about every emotion you could possibly have. And then out of spite, thankfulness, probably about everything else, he tells Robin Feld his pig is dead. It's been dead, pretty much didn't survive the kidnapping, just roughed up too much. All those years of denying the death of Lauren, everything going on with the pig, all of it. He can't deny the pig's death anymore, and he can't carry on any connection that maybe was there between the pig and Lauren. So all of this hits all at once, and Cage nails it. Blubbering mess and all the works. The real moment that will likely get submitted to the Oscars. A very rough moment, but an unbelievably rough moment for Robin Feld, but kind of a gift, luckily. He can now grieve. He was so scared to before, and now it's forced upon him. He loves Lauren so much that he is defined by his love for her from an outside point of view. That person he is in love with, in some cases of this type of crisis, it could be a thing, it could be a god. That thing is now gone. They may never get past that. Many people don't. But I believe Robin Feld does here. We end with him back in the woods at his cabin, being able to listen to the tape in the boombox. This tape becomes something that allows him to be able to move on in my belief. There's always that piece of her that's with him that he can now come to terms with, and that relationship isn't necessarily gone. It's kind of turned into something new. We end with the same shot as the beginning of Nicolas Cage. Seemingly the same, but this is a dramatically changed person. And that's this existentialist film the best I can remember. I do love how it plays with some of those existential philosophy paradoxes in its own way. Like a paradox I'm more familiar with is one of where being in despair where you don't really know it. If you have something in your life that you absolutely define yourself by, how were you before that point of having this thing in your life? Let's say this thing has never existed before, like a child. If you're defining yourself completely by your relationship to this child from an outside point of view, you define yourself by this child, then there's no way you were whole before that child existed. So you had to be in despair, right? But you weren't. Right? At least not in that earlier moment. But after that moment of having this connection with this child, you are retroactively somebody who was in despair. You just had no way of knowing. To me, Pig kind of plays another bookend of that. But in the case of this film, the paradoxes are Lauren, Amir's mom, and the pig. The pig may be more intertwined with Lauren, her being dead, but not in Robin Feld's mind. The pig being there is good because it's more of that literal representation of what was going on between Robin and Lauren, with Robin's pig being dead, but continuing on with this certainty that the pig is alive. Amir's situation, he has the weirdness that he probably could move on. He yearns for that relationship change with his mom, but is completely denied it. She's dead. The husk is still there. The cells reproduce, but she's dead. There's also some formatting to the film that's kind of broken off into like segments like the courses of a meal. Not sure if there's more to that little gimmick that I just wouldn't understand though. I'm not a chef myself. There could be bits reading the names of these segments and being like, oh, that's a palate cleanser. Or those are all the Iron Chef season 7 ingredients. Or even, that's the new Q drop. But let me know in the comments if you have any insight there. Overall, I give this film a 3.5 out of 4. Once I've given it more thought in writing about it, Probably a bit less before I did that. But it's got some good food for thought. Cage is absolutely great. I think there's just something meta interesting there that Cage is somebody who probably takes his acting as seriously as this character takes his meals and interactions with people. And I like a lot that Nicolas Cage isn't method, where he goes more expressionistic, experimental, you know, takes things a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it doesn't work, but when it does, it's pretty great. I take it as something akin to how like David Lynch tends to tackle film, almost like making a painting rather than just like a realistic narrative. And this is an easier performance of Nicolas Cage's to take seriously, even when he looks like an extra from The Walking Dead sitting down and eating a meal in a nice restaurant. But I mean, this movie does have a lot of faults. It's way too dark, I think, on a technical level. Literally not enough light sometimes, or the wrong cinematography or color grading. I'm not necessarily technically knowledgeable enough to express this exact thing here. Something to that effect. Watching at home might be a pain in the ass without a good TV with some good blacks and the lights off. And you, check out our Conjuring 3 vid next, once I get it out. Robert and I are talking together a lot in that one, and he contributed a ton to the thoughts in this vid. We recorded it earlier together, but I messed up the audio, so I had to do this by myself here. Conjuring vid may be a little bit of a flip of that, where it's actually a lot of Robert talking, a lot of me laughing like a jackass. If you got this far, you get a no prize. Peace.